Julia?
Last time we talked about utilitarianism and why it's an appealing system of ethics, not just to you and me personally, but points in its favor when you're trying to convince other people how they should behave.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that out of the way, now I want to start delving into all the many problems with utilitarianism. It's kind of sad, actually, that utilitarianism is, I think, the most defensible system of morality, and it still has so many problems that I think this is going to take us 3 times longer than the Yay Utilitarianism video. But so I'm just going to jump in and throw one of the problems at you. So utilitarianism, as we explained last time, is roughly speaking trying to maximize overall utility in general, and it's not prioritizing any one person's utility over another person's utility, and so that causes a lot of problems because it leads to these weird conclusions where someone gets utility out of something or gets disutility, negative utility out of something that we feel they have no justification for feeling that way about. So, for example, utilitarianism would seem to say that if someone gets negative utility out of knowing that there are gay people having gay sex in the country somewhere, that we should take that preference into account when we're making policy or when we're deciding how people should behave. And that seems just fundamentally wrong, so wrong that it seems to retroactively invalidate the utilitarian rule. What do you think?
Well, so first of all, you're attacking utilitarianism on an intuition basis? So
yeah.
This is
well,
saying...
it was only ever appealing to me on an intuition basis in the first place, so...
Right. So some people think that because objective morality in their belief system is a real thing, and their intuitions, they think, are actually getting at objective morality, they actually could take this not just as, oh, this is a reason not to like utilitarianism, but this is evidence utilitarianism isn't true. Just want to point that out.
I'm not even going to engage with those people right now because it's such a fundamentally wrong-headed, in my view, wrong-headed way to look at morality. But that's another video or 5, so...
Right, but so just to respond, trying to give utilitarianism the benefit of the doubt in this situation, a utilitarian might still argue that although you have to take into account every person's utility, no matter who they are, something like the example you gave is it would be so bad for society and so harmful to homosexuals to prohibit gay sex that the psychological suffering that some people might feel does not come anywhere close to the suffering that would be caused by making it illegal.
Okay, but it would be easy to come up with thought experiments in which you have, I don't know, 10 gay people in the world, hopefully they like each other, and you have thousands and thousands of people who are bothered by homosexuality. And so it's not hard to imagine that the math would work out so that you're causing more overall disutility by allowing gay people to have sex. So...
Well, if the 10 gay people having sex caused just excruciating suffering to every other of the billions of people in the world, although I could completely understand why they would want to have sex under those circumstances, it would also be a little bit cruel, perhaps, given the fact that they know how much suffering they're going to cause.
Okay. I guess if I make my example extreme enough, it starts to chip away at my intuition that it would be justifiable to continue doing the thing. But it still seems really problematic. I feel like there would be a lot of circumstances in the middle where utilitarianism would point to this policy and my intuitions would point to hell no. So, well, okay, how about, to rebut my own point, how about saying that you have to take a broader view of utilitarianism, or of your utility calculations, in the sense that you could, by forcing people to accustom themselves to the idea that gay sex is happening, you're actually increasing utility in the long run down the road?
Yeah, absolutely. That maybe today people are going to suffer because they hate the idea of it, but maybe the next generation, they'll be used to it and they won't think it a big deal.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So again, this still feels a little bit like a cop-out to me, that like I've decided what I think is a good action or should be allowed, and so I'm just saying that in general society will be better off if we allow it, no matter how much disutility it causes now. So that feels like a little bit unfair to me, but I'm going to go with that for now.
Well, so let me tell you about a philosophical idea in utilitarianism that really disturbs me. which is, suppose there's a hermit living out in the wilderness.
Oh, I know where this is going.
He has no impact whatsoever on anyone. Nobody even knows about this hermit. And let's say this hermit is a little bit less happy than, say, the average person in society. Or say that the hermit actually has a little bit of negative utility. Like, on average, their life is actually a little bit negative utility.
Negative as in less than...
Less than zero.
So zero is sort of like, I'm indifferent between existing and not existing, and so he's actually unhappy?
Slightly unhappy, yeah.
Oh, then you should kill the hermit.
Well, so first of all, utilitarianism would say, if you went out and shot this hermit with a laser beam so he dies instantly, then you'd actually...
He wants to die.
Well, he doesn't necessarily want to die, though. He might strongly not want to die.
Then he's wrong.
He's
I'm
wrong.
sorry, if he has negative utility, then he should want to die.
Well, no, that's not necessarily the same thing. He might be afraid of death. He might be disturbed by the idea of not existing.
He's too afraid to do what is in his own best interest.
Yeah, but he doesn't necessarily want to.
Okay, so we have two things to disentangle before we even get into the problem you raised.
Sure.
And those two things are someone's preference and that which actually maximizes the person's utility.
Right, because he might have a strong preference not to die.
Exactly. So I don't actually have a strong opinion on preference-based utilitarianism, or what is the name for the utilitarianism that maximizes the
I'm not sure.
I don't know, maybe it's classic utilitarianism, that might be the name for it. But anyway, so in this case, to follow preference utilitarianism, you would be letting the hermit live since he wants to live. But if you're following classic utilitarianism, as I've possibly incorrectly defined it, you would kill the hermit even if he doesn't want you to, because he's better off that way.
Right. So
classic utilitarianism risks verging on the paternalistic. But so I thought you were actually going to... I've heard this thought experiment before, but usually the hermit is actually happy, but maybe not as happy as the average person.
Right, so that's where I was going next.
Trickier.
Is that, let's say you decide that utilitarianism says we should try to maximize the average happiness of the society.
Right, which is a very logical, intuitive rule to follow.
Yeah, in that case, it should say that the hermit, if he's less happy than average, but still happy, and you could kill him instantly with a laser beam, you'd be increasing the average...
Why would it supposed to be a laser beam?
Why not?
Okay, go on.
You'd be increasing the average happiness of society by killing him, and therefore you'd actually be doing a good thing, not just a neutral thing, but a good thing, which is disturbing.
Right.
Another approach, you can get around this by saying, we shouldn't maximize the average utility, we should maximize the sum of utility in society.
Right.
And
in which case, you should let anyone live who's at least above the zero line of happiness. Right.
But this leads to another disturbing consequence, which is that it indicates we should have as many children as possible, so long as each of them has at least some positive utility,
right,
greater than zero.
Right. So this leads to what one philosopher, Derek Parfit, calls the repugnant conclusion, which is that it would be much better to have a world that consisted of trillions and trillions and trillions of people who were miserable, but not quite miserable enough to want to die, than it would to have a world in which there were a few million people who were all really happy. Assuming that the total utility, if you add up all those tiny little amounts of happiness that the miserable people have, would actually be greater than the sum of the happinesses of the smaller world,
right,
which just feels intuitively wrong. And so he brought that up in his classic Reasons and Persons, and he didn't have an answer to this problem. I mean, he didn't have an answer to the fact that the sum version of utilitarianism and the average version of utilitarianism each have these major problems. And so far as I know, there hasn't been any universally accepted solution to this problem in philosophy yet, which is disturbing. Because a lot of people are working very hard on that problem. I liked the example you brought up of the children, of what utilitarianism says about our obligation to have children, but we're running out of time,